Alright, so in this video we're talking about solving quadratic equations, which you probably have done in previous classes, so this is going to kind of be a review set of videos, so if you need to review, definitely focus and make sure you know how to do this, okay? So in this particular way, or this particular video, we're going to talk about solving quadratic by factoring and taking square roots. First thing to remember though is that there's a lot of different ways to solve quadratics, okay? So there's really no set best way, but we'll see a formula later on in another couple of videos that works every time for any quadratic equation. So just watch out for that. Alright, first off, anytime you have a quadratic function, it's going to look like y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. And the only rule we have is that a cannot be 1. Quadratic functions can be solved in many different ways, like I just said. So we're going to first talk about solving by factoring, which we've already done some in the previous videos, but let's talk about it just one last time. So for instance, I want to solve x squared plus 3x minus 18 equals 0. Anytime you're solving a quadratic equation, I don't care what method you're using, most of the time you're going to want to get everything on the same side. Okay? I've already got that happening over here, so I'm ready to start solving by factoring, since that's what we're focused on in this video. I'm looking for factors of negative 18 that add up to positive 3. So if you're good at factoring, those factors should be pretty easy for you. It's going to be x plus 6 and x minus 3, and that's still equal to 0. Remember, when you're factoring, all you're doing is rewriting that left-hand side. We want to do our double check to make sure we have factored this correctly. First off, we need to multiply our two numbers together, see if we get negative 18. So 6 times negative 3 is negative 18. Great. Now we want to add our two numbers together to see if we get positive 3. 6 minus 3 is positive 3. Great. As soon as you have the quadratic equations factored and rewritten and equal to 0, then you can use what's called the zero product property. It's called the zero product property because I have a product of two factors, and what the zero product property lets me do is take each one of those factors and make separate equations. So for instance, I can say x plus 6 equals 0 and x minus 3 equals 0. Now all I have to do is solve each one of these. So minus 6 on each side, so x equals negative 6 plus 3 on each side. So x equals 3. So that first quadratic equation had two solutions. X equals negative 6, x equals 3. If you're good at factoring, it's a pretty easy method. Let's try another example. Do this one in blue. Alright, this time I have t's instead of x's. That's not a big deal. Okay, I can still factor. What I want to do again, like I just said about the previous problem, is get everything on the same side. So I'm going to take 3t over to the left, so minus 3t minus 3t. Okay, cancel out. So 2t squared minus 20t plus 45. And that's still equal to negative 5 that I haven't moved yet. Now I want to get everything on the same side, so I'm going to take negative 5 over to the left by adding. So cancel out. So 2t squared minus 20t plus 50 equals 0. Alright? And so what I'm looking for now is always, can I pull out a greatest common factor or a GCF? So I notice that all three of my numbers are even, so I can always pull out a 2. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Let's pull out a 2. And that means on the inside, I have t squared minus 10t plus 25 equals 0. And you can double check yourself because 2 times t squared is 2t squared. 2 times negative 10t is negative 20t, and 2 times 25 is 50. Okay, so I haven't changed the problem. All I did was rewrite it a little bit. Now what I'm going to do to get rid of that 2 in front is divide by 2. Divide by 2. Cancel out over here, and I'm just still left with t squared minus 10t plus 25. Now, 0 divided by anything is 0. Alright, so now my problem looks a little bit easier. I don't have a number in front of my t squared, which is good. So I'm looking for factors of 25 that'll add up to negative 10. Alright, again, if you're good at factoring, this is not a big deal. It just becomes t minus 5 and t minus 5, and that's still equal to 0. We can double check ourselves by first multiplying our numbers to get positive 25, which will work. Negative 5 and negative 5 is positive 25. And then our double check is adding these two numbers to see if we get negative 10. Negative 5 plus negative 5 is negative 10. So those are two magic numbers. As soon as we have this factored correctly, then what we can do is solve. We're going to solve this by using the zero product property. So we have t minus 5 equals 0, and t minus 5 equals 0. So plus 5, so t equals 5, plus 5, so t equals 5. Now, this might look kind of weird because I had t equals 5 and t equals 5. I had two solutions, but they're the same answer. So if we had actually graphed our original problem, what's going to happen is we're only going to see one point of intersection. The calculator is pretty efficient. It's not going to show t equals 5 twice. So graphically, this only looks like one solution, but in algebraically, it's actually two solutions. It's called a repeated root. And root is just a fancy math name for solution. Okay, so this is called a repeated root. Graphically, there's only one solution. Algebraically, there's two solutions. I'm fine if you just wrote t equals 5 and be done with it, or if you want to write it out twice, that's fine. Okay, but technically, two solutions. Okay, so we can also solve quadratic equations by taking square roots. Now, the key to know when you're going to take square roots is knowing that you only have an x squared piece. There's no regular x's at all to deal with. For instance, here, I have an x squared piece. No regular x's to deal with. So I want to first get my x squared piece by itself. So I'm going to start off by saying minus 1, minus 1. So I have 2x squared equals 16. Now I want to keep going, get x squared by itself. So I'm going to do that by dividing by 2 on both sides. So I end up with x squared equals 8, because 16 divided by 2 is 8. Now you have to remember, if the power is even, like we talked about in previous videos in this chapter, that if the power is even, we have to consider plus or minus, so two answers. So we're going to get rid of the square by square rooting, and it's going to be plus or minus. So x equals plus or minus the square root of 8. You could leave your answer like that. We have x by itself, just like we wanted, or you could split this up. X equals the positive square root of 8, and x equals the negative square root of 8. Okay, so however you want to write it. And of course, you can use your calculator to turn these into decimals. I'm not going to do that this time. You can if you want to. The next problem is a little bit more complicated. Let's do that one in red. I first have to get my x squared piece by itself, just like we did before. So I need to get rid of this fraction. So to get rid of any fraction, you always multiply by whatever number's on the bottom. So I'm going to multiply by 3 on both sides. Fraction on the bottom is going to cancel out, so I'm left with 1 x plus 5 squared equals 7 times 3, which is 21. Now I need to get rid of this 1, so I'm going to divide by 1 on both sides. Cancel out, so I'm left with x plus 5 squared equals 21 divided by 1 is just 21. Okay, so now technically I have my x squared piece by itself, okay? Because this plus 5 is trapped in parentheses, so the order of operations says we have to take care of exponents before parentheses. Okay, so again, to get rid of square, I have the square root, and since my power is even, I've got to consider plus or minus. So let's do that on both sides. So plus or minus, since my power is even. And what that means is that x plus 5 now falls down because square and square root cancel out, and that's equal to plus or minus the square root of 21. I still need to get x by itself, so I'm going to subtract 5. And cancel out, so x equals negative 5 plus or minus the square root of 21. So there's two answers here. It's just written funny without plus or minus. If you don't like that, you can always split it up. So x equals negative 5 plus square root of 21. X equals negative 5 minus square root of 21. Now, again, you could convert this into a decimal if you like that. If you like decimals, I'm going to leave it like this because that's perfectly fine too. So in this video, we focused on solving by factoring and using the zero product property, and then also solving by taking square roots on each side. If you take a square root, remember though, you got to remember two answers, plus or minus, okay? So don't forget it. And that's it for this video.